And we're back like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Friday evening here with me in New York. Well, once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. So, one movie star, a Gen X, one of our people that I have barely spoken about on the channel is JCVD himself, Jean Claude Van Damme. Jean Claude Van Damme, whether or not was a great martial artist, he sold the great martial artist aspect of his persona in his movies. And unlike his almost enemy, although they shouldn't have been enemies, Seagal seemed to have a problem with him. Steven Seagal, they had this weird thing that seemed to be one way. I never thought that Van Damme gave a shit, but Seagal somehow was like offended because he didn't think that Van Damme was that great of a martial artist. It was kind of childish. But Van Damme, his fights in his various films were actual fights. Seagal, who I also loved, I mean, the guy made a lot of movies which are terrible, but which I enjoyed, would be more accurate. But Seagal fights usually ended, he cracks a guy once, fights over, breaks his hand, fights over. Van Damme, you would actually get some nice back and forth, whether it was Bloodsport, whether it was Kickboxer, or whether it was the movie that I'm going to talk about today, my single favorite film starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. The Christmas 1995 release, Sudden Death. If you ever imagined Die Hard in a sports arena, Game 6 of the 1995 NHL Eastern Conference Finals, this is your movie. Because I just described it to a T. This is Die Hard in a sports arena. And many of you know that one thing Hollywood was really, really good at, starting with the success of the original Die Hard, was making movies where the basic idea was Die Hard in a, Die Hard on a, Die Hard with a. And you can just count off the number of moderate to big budget studio films to come out of Hollywood literally for a decade. Yeah, Die Hard 2, Die Hard 3. Under Siege was what? Die Hard on a battleship. Under Siege 2 was what? Die Hard on a train. Passenger 57 was what? Die Hard on a plane. Air Force One, Die Hard on a plane. Executive Decision with Steven Seagal, Die Hard on a plane. Toy Soldiers, Die Hard in a prep school. Cliffhanger, Die Hard on a mountain. It's really amazing. Sudden Death, Die Hard in a sports arena. Now, the particular Jean-Claude Van Damme screen persona, because the thing is, all action-oriented leading men, they all had a shtick. They all had a certain kind of persona that they, not all the time, usually played in action movies. Van Damme normally played a likable galoot who wasn't necessarily the smartest, but he had a good rapport with the audience because the audience, okay, and he was, deadly with his fists and his feet, but he typically played a humble guy. Not somebody who went out of his way to start trouble, but trouble found him. Whereas Seagal, it would be a stretch to say that he often played humble, nice guys. You look at Seagal's early work, I wouldn't describe him that way. Whether it's Hard to Kill, I think Hard to Kill actually might be the most conventional protagonist he played in that era, except for the fact that he, spoiler alert, spends half the movie in a coma. But Van Damme's screen persona was of being humble, of being a good guy, a nice guy who doesn't get down to business as far as beating the shit out of people unless he absolutely has to. His instinct is not violence first. His instinct is kumbaya. Let's see if we can get along. Now, Sudden Death came along at a time where it looked as if Van Damme was going to become a bigger star in the United States than he actually ended up being. And it's kind of, we're talking levels. It seemed that he was primed to reach the Stallone Schwarzenegger level. It didn't happen. And part of it was that this movie did way better overseas, proportionally speaking, than it did in the United States. And I remember being really geeked up for this film because I'd seen the trailer. The trailer looked good, and the advance buzz was also pretty good. That, yeah, this is probably the best film that he's made, up to this point. And a film came out, and it did just okay. It had a total budget of $35 million. It made about 65. But as I said, it didn't do as well in the United States. And the trouble when you open an action movie in the Christmas season, even one with as confident a production as Sudden Death, director Peter Hyams, really, really good. He did the 2001 A Space Odyssey sequel, which is really not as bad as you would think. It's actually a decent movie. But Peter Hyams, very talented filmmaker. He later did, in 97, The Relic, kind of underrated horror movie. I might have to do an episode on that one. But Sudden Death has the confident production. It has the big budget. It has fantastic crowd work. It can't be easy to shoot a movie like this, where you have thousands and thousands of people in attendance. Now, if memory serves, they shot like the crowd shots, the big pullaways or cutaways of the crowds. They shot during an actual game. And they even had some real hockey players, some stars of the era, such as Luc Robitaille, play themselves within the world of this movie. And the effect, it's really impressive. And most of these kinds of Die Hard in a Die Hard on a Die Hard with a movies, they kind of sink or swim on the strength of their villain. Executive Decision, the 1996 film starring Kurt Russell, Steven Seagal, John Leguizamo. The villain is played by a fantastic British actor named David Suchet. He's not a memorable villain, and I feel like that was what kept Executive Decision from reaching the exalted level of, let's say, even an Air Force One. Because plot point for plot point, Executive Decision is a better movie than Air Force One. It's literally the same story, except it's not the president on the plane. But the president is involved, hence the title of the movie, Executive Decision. In a decision making, do we have to blow this airliner out of the sky? This is, again, one of those movies that could not be made, and it's not a criticism, in the post 9/11 era. But Jean-Claude, in this film, plays like a security expert. I think that he works for the fire department. I'm not. Wait. I'm sorry. I got myself again. I apologize, with 1,000 thoughts colliding through my head. These films sink or swim on the strength of their villain. The original Die Hard has a sensational performance by Alan Rickman. John Lithgow in Cliffhanger, scenery-chewing William Shatner, James Woods times 100 as the big bad in Cliffhanger. And Gary Oldman in Air Force One, Get Off My Plane. You understand what I'm saying? In this movie, you have Powers Booth, a great actor, as the villain. He engineers, he's a former Secret Service agent. Oddly enough, there's a major plot twist in Air Force One where a Secret Service agent is a bad guy. Sorry for the spoiler. But Powers Booth in this film plays, he's the main villain, and he basically is a terrorist, but he's not really a terrorist. He's closer to Hans Gruber. He just wants money. And when, he asks for some crazy amount of money, 100 million, whatever the amount is, I don't remember, 200 million. And they said, well, why are you asking for so much? And it's such a classic dialogue bit. He goes, what, in this economy? As if the economy has something to do with whether you ask for 100 million or 500 million. What do you expect in this economy? It's just absolute gold. Powers Booth was fantastic in that film. But Van Damme plays a father. He has two young children. I guess they're supposed to be about 8 and 10. And much was made when the film was released. This is so stupid to even say, but I'm going to say it anyway. The film showed good family values. There was a great buzzword and catchphrase in the 90s, family values. We still hear it now, but it somehow meant more then because those two words had not been put together like the way that they were during the 90s. So he has these two kids, and he ends up getting to take them to Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals, NHL. And Van Damme's character of Darren McCord, a little bit of an unlikely name for somebody with a Dutch or Belgian accent, but we go with it. I guess he's supposed to be French-Canadian. Okay, fine. But he takes his kids to Game 6, and his kind of security skills come into play when, of course, he's the only person in the building who knows that there is a terrorist incident going on. And I forgot how he figures this out, but he's the only one who knows what's going on, and therefore he's what? He's the only one who can stop the terrorists. A la Harrison Ford in Air Force One, a la Stallone in Cliffhanger, a la Sean Astin in, am I really going to forget the name? Toy Soldiers. Wow, that's pretty bad that I almost forgot the name of that. But he's the only one who can stop them. He's the John McClane of the movie. And knowing that Van Damme can get up to athletic, acrobatic, quite frankly, fuckery that somebody like Bruce Willis, no offense, can't really get involved in. You know, Wesley Snipes did a little of it in Passenger 57. We know that this is going to be different even with the big budget. And we wonder, are they going to do anything with the fact that they are in a sports arena? And not only that, but they're playing Game 6 of the Eastern Conference Finals. So essentially, Powers Booth has 20,000 hostages. So this is not something that necessarily would land as you're watching the film. The fans are going crazy. We're going to win the game, and we're going to get to a Game 7 of the Stanley Cup and all of this stuff. In the meantime, if Powers Booth's plan goes off the way that he wants it to, everyone in the arena, with the exception of him and a couple of his people, they're all going to be dead. It is going to be a horrendous mass slaughter. But hey, ignorance is bliss, right? Let's have fun. Let's have fun at the game. But the family values angle. It was Michael Medved, who was a film critic. He worked with Jeffrey Lyons at the time. And the irony is that all of the TV critics, Siskel and Ebert, 2 thumbs up. And both Jeffrey Lyons and Michael Medved, I'm pretty sure they didn't do thumbs, but they both liked the film. But Michael Medved actually said he's the one who I remember talking about the family values, and he was even kind of joking about it and laughing because it was so absurd. But there's a moment in the movie where Jean-Claude Van Damme has to go investigate something. He knows there's sinister doings, and he tells his 2 kids, don't go anywhere. Stay in your seats. And damned if they don't spend the rest of the movie rooted to the spot. And I guess that's what passed for family values in a movie in 1995. The fact that Jean-Claude tells his kids, don't move from the seat. You two, you stay right here. And mild spoiler, there's a moment an hour later in the movie where the boy goes, I didn't go anywhere. I didn't go anywhere. Fucking great. Now, what I mentioned about were they going to do anything with the fact that the film is set, we're playing a hockey game as all of this terrorist nonsense and the FBI, and there's someone on the FBI who's not really working with the FBI, he's working with Powers Booth. Are they going to do anything with the fact that this game is actually going on? The answer is yes, because JCVD's Darren McCord was a juvenile hockey player, and quite a good one at that, and dreamed of playing in the NHL. So in the world of this film, and it is not only the highlight of this movie, but it may be the single best moment in the entire film career of Jean-Claude Van Damme. He has to get on the ice. He's got to get on the ice somehow. And he, through a crazy series of circumstances, it's a little bit like, how does Leslie Nielsen as Frank Drebin end up singing the national anthem? It is that contorted that a police officer ends up as an umpire, but before that, he ends up singing the national anthem, Enrico Palazzo. So somehow Jean-Claude Van Damme ends up in goal during the game, and he makes a save, and the place goes crazy. They think that he's actually the goalie. Now, he can't stay in goal. So I remember thinking, my dad and I and my sister, we actually saw this in theaters. It was a pretty packed crowd. I thought the movie was going to be a bigger hit given how many people were in the theater. But I remember thinking, how's he going to get out of goal? What is he going to do? So Van Damme is standing in goal, trying to figure out, presumably, how the fuck do I get out of here now that I got here? And there's a referee, a line judge or somebody, a ref is like standing near him. And he reaches out to the ref with a finger and taps the guy on the shoulder. And when the ref turns around, he slugs him and the ref goes flying. So he gets himself thrown out of the game. Absolute gold. And so One thing that is slightly different from the way that the Powers Booth character with Hans Gruber in Die Hard. Hans Gruber's plan does involve a lot of people dying who don't need to, but he doesn't indiscriminately kill. And there is a version of Die Hard where you get the idea that he just wants the money. He is not necessarily enjoying what he's doing or taking delight in killing. The character that Powers Booth plays in Sudden Death is bent. I think this guy is really fucking sick and twisted. He seems to delight in teasing and tantalizing and telling people, I'm going to kill you in 30 seconds, words to that effect. So this guy is a real sick puppy. He's not just a criminal. This is next level. Like, this guy is in between Hans Gruber and Hannibal Lecter. I get the feeling that he's that fucked up. So, yeah, there's a lot of shit blowing up real good, a lot of spectacle. And an actor that I really liked in Full Metal Jacket, Dorian Harewood, he played, I think he played 8-Ball, was the kind of the code name, if you want to call that, or the nickname of the character he plays in Full Metal Jacket. So he has a really good supporting role. And Raymond J. Barry, an actor I really like, he was in Born on the 4th of July years earlier. He plays Ron Kovich's father, the Tom Cruise character. But Raymond J. Barry is just one of those actors. He looks a little bit like Roddy McDowall, but he has a certain stature and a certain standing. He didn't necessarily have a huge career. He was in a lot of movies, but he has a certain gravitas. And in this movie, he plays the vice president. So the initial entree of Powers Booth is that he hijacks the owner's box. The vice president of the United States is there. So once he's able to do that, then everybody in the arena is basically locked in place. But the fans don't know. Fans don't know what's going on. So when Sudden Death was not the hit that people were hoping that it would be, it put a little bit of a damper on the fact that Van Damme had had more or less an uninterrupted run of big box office hits. And the next movie that he did after Sudden Death was a film that I also saw in theaters called Maximum Risk. Not very good. As much as Natasha Henstridge, it looked like she was going to become a bigger star than she was on the strength of Species, which came out in the summer of '95. That was a movie. I mean, it's not really that good of a movie. That's another good guilty pleasure film. But Maximum Risk, I saw it at the movies at Sunrise Mall. And after a half hour, I realized film wasn't very good. But then, as if by magic, the print burned. Now, I don't know how these things happen. I didn't study that. But we were watching the movie, and it was a real change, and all of a sudden, it looked like the screen was melting, but it was the print that was melting. So they didn't have another film can. They couldn't do anything. So they made an announcement, whoever the they was, maybe the projectionist, go to the ticket counter and get a refund. We're really sorry. So they didn't even say, well, you watched 30 minutes of the movie, tough shit. We actually got a full refund. And I don't know, the other movie from '96 that I saw with Van Damme, The Quest, not very good. The only good thing about that movie is that Roger Moore plays like Van Damme's handler in that film. Not very good. Sudden Death, though, is one of those kinds of films that, yes, you have to pretty much shut your brain off because nothing that happens could realistically happen. But you can say that about all of those other movies in this particular genre. Even something like, and of all the films that I mentioned, the one that tries the hardest to be believable is Executive Decision. I don't believe that any of that could happen. But the way that Kurt Russell and John Leguizamo and also Joe Morton, I forgot, he has a really good role in that film. The way that they get onto the plane where the terrorist is threatening everybody, the way that they get onto it without the terrorist being alerted is very, very clever. And some terrific stunt work, not so much in the way of CGI, but really, really good stunt work. But even that film, you say, well, none of this could happen. This is maybe 5% of this movie could happen. But if you shut your brain off, so Die Hard has a lot of real human elements. It has a lot of, because of the fact that John McClane is just a guy. Yeah, it seems to be indestructible at the end of all the Die Hard movies, the number of times he should have been killed. But he is vulnerable. Van Damme in this film is Energizer Bunny level. Just shut your brain off. And this film is really, really It's a lot of fun. And that's when Siskel and Ebert both reviewed it. They talked about how stupid it was, but how entertaining. And they really liked Van Damme's performance. They said it seemed like he went out of his way to almost try to engage the audience directly. There are moments in the film where it feels like he's playing to the audience, that he's not just interacting with the other characters. You don't get that from Bruce Willis in the original Die Hard. You may get a little bit of it, a little bit in the second and third movies, but the first one, he's not doing that. Because the first one, Bruce Willis wasn't really a big movie star. Die Hard made him a movie star. So he's the star, but he's not giving a movie star performance. I believe that Van Damme was encouraged to stretch and to try to be funny. And there's some laughs with his accent. They did the same thing in Hard Target. Hard Target's pretty good. That might be the second best Jean-Claude Van Damme. But you know what? Time Cop is pretty good too. Ron Silver, good villainous performance, real funny shit. Sudden Death, I don't think that it's available for free on streaming anywhere. I looked it up yesterday. Got to pay a couple of bucks, unless you happen to catch it on TV. But Peter Hyams is somebody that he knows how to stage large-scale sequences, not just action. Because he's a cinematographer as well as a filmmaker. It's kind of hard to describe this, but there are certain filmmakers that when you see a long shot of a structure of some kind, it could be a museum, it could be a bank, it could be a sports arena, it could be the inside of a sports arena. There are certain filmmakers that just know how to frame it for maximum impact. And there are a lot of shots in this film that are long shots of elements we normally don't see in this kind of framing, and it adds to the realism as much as this movie is not realistic, as I said, even a little tiny bit. But it brings you into the action. And the way they are able to blend because the people in attendance are not extras. The people sitting near Van Damme's kids and that Van Damme runs into in the hallways and all of that when he's trying to stop the terror attack, those are extras. But the people in attendance, they just shot a bunch of footage. And I think what they did was, if I remember reading this right, they were like 15 minutes. It might have been during the first and second intermission of a regular game. But they basically told the crowd, here's what we want you to do. We want you to do the wave, whatever it was. But Peter Hyams was able to get exactly the kind of footage he wanted and blending it with the first unit footage, in other words. And that stuff works brilliantly. And I would defy anybody watching this to say, oh, I would have known for sure that those weren't extras. Well, I don't agree. It feels seamless. It's all very well done. And there are some excellent special effects. I think that they used some models and some miniatures to stand in for example, a helicopter. And there is an explosion in the arena, which is, I don't know how they pulled it off or how they made it look as good as it does. But it's a really good 2.5-star movie. So this is never going to be high art. It was not intended to be high art. It's not Die Hard. But out of all the movies I mentioned, it's better than Passenger 57. I don't know that it's better than Toy Soldiers. Toy Soldiers is a film I have a soft spot for. Toy Soldiers I would give 3 to 3.5 stars out of 4 for sure. But this film exists solely to keep us on the edge of our seats, maybe laugh a little because Van Damme does have a number of laugh lines. And when he plays goalie, when I tell you that was 5 minutes of the movie that the audience was roaring. It's not a comedy, but that sequence, although it's important within the context of the story, it's so preposterous, but given the rest of what happens in the film, maybe it's not as bonkers as so many of the other turns of plot. And then, you scratch your head, well, there's no way that he could have, the Powers Booth character, he couldn't have gotten away with this, could have gotten away with this, could have gotten... You just go with it, and you'll have a great time. If you sit down to watch this movie, when it's over, you'll have a big goofy smile on your face, and you'll be laughing at the absurdity, but also how much fun this movie was. Every inch a guilty pleasure from first frame to last. And unlike, for example, Die Hard, which ended up becoming a Christmas movie, even though it was released in the summer. Alas, sudden death, despite the fact that it had a Christmas slot all along and it was released in the Christmas season of 1995. This is not a Christmas movie. This is just a popcorn munching, stupid, goofy action movie with a great star in his prime, holding it all together at the center, Jean-Claude Van Damme. Sudden Death, directed by Peter Hyams and starring Jean-Claude Van Damme, Powers Booth, Dorian Harewood, and Raymond J. Barry. This has been episode 411 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Friday evening here with me in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then, peace.